Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Gross. Today on this podcast, we're going to be talking with two current members of police in Canada that have had long careers in police. I'll let them introduce themselves. And firstly, before you guys do, I just want to thank you both. It's a privilege and an honor to have both of you on and to hear your thoughts on policing in Canada currently and the state of the police in general and the way things have changed over your career. So without further ado, I'll hear from you both. We have here with us S and C. I'll refer to them as S and C for the sake of anonymity. S, let's hear from you first, please, and thank you.
Buddy, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here, and having somebody looking at the way policing has changed. It's obviously something near and dear to my heart, as is my good colleague. I'm looking at I'm about 25 years in policing over a couple of different services, and I've done quite a bit in my career. I've been involved in specialty sections from tactical response right up to investigations, and I really have seen quite a bit of gambit over my years. And as will probably come out in this talk, it's changed in my time. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Hey, and I echo Sierra's thanks for having us on. I guess I'm the last person in the world who hasn't been on a podcast. So, and like Sierra, I've got 31 years in policing. So, again, a wide variety of experience. I've worked in several different police forces in Canada. I've worked in and outside of Canada as an officer, doing a wide variety of different types of different types of policing. And as Sierra says, things have definitely changed. And but we both are active duty, and neither of us speaks for our agencies. We simply are discussing the aspects of how policing has changed in our experience, but we don't represent our agencies or speak for them, I should say.
Okay, so let's get right into that. So both of you mentioned you've both been in this career for a long time. You've both been working in police for a long time. So from a bird's eye view, looking at the very beginning of your career, the first 5 years, first 10 years, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the force and the way policing has been conducted? Change of policy, if the effectiveness of the force has changed. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So let's go first on.
So, you know what? That's a really loaded question. We can look at it from various perspectives. So, I guess let's start with, when I first arrived, and as we're talking here, I can picture myself stepping out of my first cruiser with my shiny shoes and well-pressed uniform, and visions in my head of doing the best for the public, and serving my community, chasing bad guys, doing all of those sort of things. That's what the expectation was when I started, and the policies, the procedures, the expectation to the community itself was exactly that. And for the first few years, things were different. Technology wasn't where we are now. So when you went to court to testify in simple cases, your case was all of a sudden something elaborate because there was technology involved, cameras, radio calls, even the internet when I started was in its infancy. When you went to a call, there was an expectation that people understood, I'm calling the police because they're going to do something to help me on my bad day. And the bad day may have been a break and enter, somebody broke in and stole their Christmas presents, to some kind of an assault. But they understood that 911 meant that help was coming. What I'm seeing now, and I know I might jump around a little bit, so I apologize for that now. Back then, that was the way everything was perceived. That was the way I saw it, at least, with my shiny shoes and new uniform. Today, it's evolved almost to an us against them. Our job hasn't changed. We still serve the public. We still show up on people's worst day. People still call 911 when bad things are happening. But the moment you arrive, it really is us against them. And everything that you do is immediately under scrutiny. Whereas before, you did your job to the best of your abilities. You walked well within the line of the law, because you knew that at the end of the day, you were going to be judged based on your actions and not based on someone's interpretation. And with the inclusion of technology, I think that has changed the playing field completely. There's now more reliance on technology to do the job and interpretation of what's happening than there is on the officers to show up and do their job properly and effectively. So just start that off.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie, over to you. Anything?
Well, one thing you said was we joined with the expectation of helping the public, helping society. And that always sounds kind of, I guess a lot of people today would see it as cringe or some sort of bullshit public relations thing. But the truth is I don't really know many officers, including myself, who didn't start in this career to really try and do good. I mean, as a young kid, I didn't like bullies. And as I grew older, the idea of being able to sort of really put what I believed into action, standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. I remember someone saying to me one time, talking about some passing issue in the news, and they said, I wrote my member of parliament sort of, bristling with pride. And I said, I put on a bulletproof vest every day I go out. Point being is that we put our convictions on the line. We actually go out there where we can get injured or killed or sued or maligned or dragged through the mud in the media for some millisecond of action that's captured on someone's cell phone and then, misinterpreted or misrepresented. And the point I guess I'm making is that a lot of us started out in the service or in the line of work in policing to help. We really did. And experience will erode your initial intentions. But at the end of the day, you're still there trying to help people. And there's, people in the media, the people who, festoon their social media with all cops are bastards acronyms. And you can never convince people like that, no matter how honest you are, of the fact that the majority of us joined this job to actually do something and to put our convictions on the line, not just write letters. I think as you go on and move on, and there is, police are cast as villains, which is nothing really new. No one likes authority, including a lot of cops. But like Sierra says, you come in with the shiny shoes and you come in with the expectations of serving the public, and then you discover that a lot of the public doesn't really want you to serve them or help them, or they reject your efforts. Becomes difficult. And that's all part of the maturation process as you go from shiny shoes to, your shoes look like you shined them with a Hershey bar, and it's like anything else. It's a transition. But Sierra's right. We joined the job to do some good, and experiences will change you, not the ones you think. Anyways,
that's true. And again, bouncing around here, when bad things happen and the police show up, and whether it's a domestic, he's beating on her, or in some cases she's beating on him, I'll tell you now, those sort of actions doesn't look good It doesn't look fun. It doesn't look to the general public who are untrained, who don't understand why we're doing certain things. It looks bad. I'm going to tell you that now. But the reality is, we're doing certain things that we have been trained to do. That science has said, if you do this, you will, create some kind of behavior change that will stop the violence. But it doesn't look good. The problem is, 25 years ago, when I chased somebody down and we're wrestling on the ground and I finally get the handcuffs on, it looks rough. But nobody really looked at that. They just kind of went, "Oh wow, that cop, he was friggin' fast and he caught that guy running across the field." And they didn't look at it like that. But now it's, you chase somebody down, you wrestle them to the ground, you put the handcuffs on, immediately the cameras are out and people are perceiving, why did you have to be so aggressive to that person? Why did you slam them down on the ground? Why didn't you just ask them 145 times to please lay down on the ground and roll over and put your hands behind your back? This isn't TV. It's not Miami Vice. It doesn't happen that way. The reality is, if I'm throwing, if I'm throwing some kind of knee into the leg, it's not that I'm just kneeing this person because I feel like it. I need to get some kind of behavior change in order to get control. But the public now, and again, because of cameras and the internet and social media, before you finish throwing the first knee, 1,000 people are tweeting and retweeting, and it's all over social media. And then you're being judged based on that snippet in time, than the fact that this person just, beat up a store owner, robbed the place, and ran down the street.
Okay.
So.
And these are great points, and it goes into something that I was really looking to ask. And I'll ask two questions here, and I'd love to hear thoughts from both of you. So you've mentioned how the camera has changed policing really dramatically, and the body cam is obviously some relatively new technology, and it's seemed to have also really shaken up and changed policing globally, and it's something that's become incorporated in police forces globally. What are your thoughts on the body cam and how it's affected policing? What is it for better or for worse?
Go ahead, bro.
So I think that's a really good question. When I started policing, the technology was a radio in my car and a pad of paper on the dash to write my calls down. Now we're looking at computers, GPS, high-end radios, and of course body cams. When I was policing in the early stages, the early days, I policed and I did my job because I went to the call, I listened to what everybody was saying, I interpreted the information. If I made an arrest, I made an arrest. If it was just, if it was a case of I didn't trust what this guy was saying, then I would, extend the interview and I would ask certain pointed questions, or, find different ways of getting the information. What I see now, and of course, this is my old gray eyes looking at what policing has become, is it's policing to the camera. I'm asking the perfect question, expecting to get the perfect answer, knowing that the evidence is no longer me sitting in the stand with my notebook and my being prepared to go to court. I might as well not even show up, because ultimately it's going to be, what did you say on the camera? What did you mean by? How is somebody who has no policing background interpreting what's being seen? So the new officer is learning to, it's almost like being an actor. You arrive at the call, and yes, you're going to do your job, but you're not going to do as much of your job, I find, because you're playing to the camera. You don't want to be perceived to the public or to whoever is going to be judging what the information being presented in court based on what's played in the camera. So whereas I would write my notes and have them thorough, and yes, I would go to the sit on the stand and expect, this is a homicide trial or an impaired operation trial, and I know that the defense is coming after me, but they're coming after me based on what's in my notes. Now I prepare based on what is on the camera, what exactly did I say? So I'm no longer, worrying about making sure my notes are correct to refresh my memory. Now I find that you're playing to the camera, and vital pieces are being lost, or the approach that police take are being lost because they're working to the camera as opposed to working to doing their job effectively. That's what I see personally.
Charlie?
Yeah, so I would probably say that when like Sierra, when I started, the technology was much lower. It wasn't, it wasn't non-existent, but it was different than it is now. And so you relied on the training that you were given, how to interview people, how to interpret body language, all those things that common sense would dictate. What, like Sierra says, as the technology advances, live television, folks. All that being said, when I first started, what I really enjoyed was you interacted with people. You interacted with people, and you weren't too concerned if you joked around. And when you look back, some of our conversations with people, they belong in a Seinfeld episode. They could be very funny, yes. But if you go to a call where some guy is reporting for the 5th time this month that the demons are asking them to point his shoes towards the south so that the monkey fires on this, whatever the case may be, and you talk to him about the fit of his tinfoil hat, and you realize that he's not a harm to himself or others, so he can't be brought in for a psychological assessment. He's not in any kind of danger or stress or anything, and nothing you do is disrespectful or mean in any way. You talk to him like he talks to other people, and you would kind of have fun at these calls. They were interesting. You interacted. You weren't too worried about how you would be perceived. Whereas now, I think if the minutia of every single detail of what you said, how you looked, at facial expression, like holy fucking batshit, it just gets to be so out of control that someone's always going to find some bone to pick, so that you end up becoming this like robotic automaton. I don't know if that's sort of
you're right.
Double negative there, but you become this very robotic person who speaks in a fashion that nobody can be offended. And that's in today's world where everyone's offended by something. And you lose that vital connection to people. And you would go to calls. People like myself and Sierra, we're old-time cops. And we go to calls and we try to resolve the issue. That's the key. You're solving problems. You don't go there to try and decide, who you're going to arrest or, what, this, that, or the other thing. You go to the call, you keep your ears and eyes open. You're very alert to what's going on for your safety and that of others, but you appear to be very calm and very relaxed, and you chit chat with the people there, and you engage in all kinds of commentary, all kinds of discussion, and you often resolve issues. And by the time you leave, people are laughing. Oh, I know those cops could be so funny, or, they're pretty easygoing guys. And the issue's solved. Whereas now, if everything is recorded, it's pretty easy to take a 3-second snippet of what anyone does. Name me your hero, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, who's your hero? And I can find he or she some 3-second snippet in the course of any day that they live and jump all over it the way a defense lawyer would or some activist would. And as a result, it really diminishes what the activists claim they're after. They say that we don't want police to just arrest people. We want better reactions with interactions with the mentally ill and so forth and so on. We had all those. We were doing those things 100%. The same way that when we stopped people who were walking around at 3 a.m. in an area where there's all kinds of drug dealing going on. You were creating a safer environment and getting guns off the street. And then a very small group of people raise hell, and all of a sudden those things are changed. And suddenly we can't stop people anymore. It's ridiculous. We hear them tell us and talk to each other and laugh about how they can carry guns around with impunity now because the police can't just stop and question you. That simple thing of stopping and questioning people in the province of Ontario, which was brought in by Yasser Naqvi and the Liberal government, the provincial Liberal government. You stop the ability of police to get out of a car, wave at someone, smile, walk over and say, hey man, what's up? We had a lot of complaints and a lot of crime in this area. And it's 2 a.m. and you're out here just sort of standing. Everything okay? Did you have a fight with your girlfriend or did she kick you out? Are you okay? And you can talk with people and form a connection. Now, in order to do that, you have to read them these preambles about how they don't need to speak to you and they can invoke their right to silence and call a lawyer. Oh my God. After you finish reading all of that, then you try and talk to them. It's like, imagine if I told you that every time you want to make love to your chosen partner, whatever that may be, you have to read this like 5-minute preamble. It's like, trying to tear a condom off and maintain the romance. You can't do it. So there's all of these changes that have been brought in by both people who seek to actively destroy police, people who think they're doing the right thing but are actively destroying police. And all it does is it's creating greater distances between the police and the community, the very things they claim they want to remedy. In my experience, I don't know, I think Sarah's probably the same. After 31 years, the biggest difference or change I know is that the concept of if it's not broken, don't fix it has been violated so many times, both in this province and across the country, that police have gone from being able to get out of the cruiser, walk over and talk to someone in a very informal way, chit chat, find out what's going on, just make sure everything's okay, or maybe the person is up to something, they're about to commit a break and enter or worse. And you can just talk to them. If they go to walk away, they go to walk away. I've had people walk away from me. I don't run after them and grab them or anything unless I reasonably believe they're about to commit an indictable offense. And if they flip me off and say, I'm not talking to you, man, I say, that's cool. Why don't you want to talk to me? And you draw them back in. And sometimes you can find out, yeah, they're waiting to pick up some dope or sell some dope, or they're up to no good, and you can move them along, or if you're able to in some way remedy or mitigate the situation. But because there are these people who are not police officers, who are convinced they know what's best for society, who are able to create these political changes, you now have a gulf between the police and the people. And when you have that, it becomes like an occupying army. I've worked overseas in a law enforcement capacity. And when you're an occupying army in a foreign country, there's a very, very distinct they and us, very distinct. For a police agency in a modern Western liberal democracy, as it were, to function, you can't have those gaps, those gulfs, those massive distances between the people and the police. We are the people. We live among you. We don't live in barracks on the outside of town and then, come into town when it's on prearranged bat signals to wreak havoc and violate everyone's civil rights. We're the community just like you. We vote differently than each other. We have different opinions than each other in the same agency, for crying out loud. So you have to have the ability for the police to interact with the population they serve. And politicians in this country and in the states that I can see have continuously eroded that ability. And the worst part about it is when they erode that ability, like I think of Yasser Naqvi, he's held up by the media as some sort of a hero for having just basically vandalized the relations between police and the people. How stopping police from engaging in conversations with people is a good thing, I'll never know. But hey, he was the Solicitor General, so he must know so much more than me. Anyways.
You know what? And just to jump back in there, you said a couple of things there, Charlie, that are bang on. So, way back in the 1800s, and Robert Peel said the police are the people and the people are the police. So, we're part of the community. We still go and buy our groceries in the same place as everybody else. When I worked for a small police service, I remember standing in line at the grocery store, with my wife, picking up fruits and vegetables with, somebody two or three people ahead of me that I had arrested the night before. So there I am in my community, and I know that I've done my job, and here's this person. There's no animosity. I was just doing my job. But one of the other things that Charlie was hitting on is the conversation, right? The gift of the gab. Talk to any single cop who's got a little bit of time on. Certainly, best would be our vintage. We learn the gift of gab. We learn to talk to people. That art of stopping and talking to somebody. Hey, what's going on? How's things? Oh, what are you doing in the park? If it's 3 a.m. or 2 p.m, you learn to talk to people. I've trained a lot of cops. And one of the very first things I would do is exactly that. Let's go park the car and we'll walk through this park, say hi, how do you do? And then ask them, what do you see? What is unusual? The person who's walking towards you sort of gives you the bright eyes and turns around and walks away. Those are those little pieces, those almost like a policing life skill that you're training young officers. And how do you talk to somebody, right? What is the bat signal, or the spidey senses, or the hair on the back of your head telling you? Do I pursue this? And then how are you going to pursue it? How are you going to talk to that person? Not everything is chase them down, grab them, throw them to the ground. A lot of it is it's a skill, the gift of gab. Now we're always talking about in the policing world, tactical communication. Sure, when the guy's got a gun to his head and you've got to try to convince them to not shoot themselves, and I've done that several times. That skill is being lost because we don't know how to approach the public. We don't know how to communicate with the public properly, because no matter what you say, somebody has a camera. No matter how you approach it, someone has a camera, and that's what's going to be read. And what Charlie was saying is, about going to different communities and talking to people. I would talk to people in one way in one community, whereas I go to another community, and as soon as I walk in the door, fuck you, fucking cop. But I'm talking back to them in exactly that same fashion. I'm speaking their language, and it's understood that we're having a conversation. But to the public who are going to be sitting back watching this play out on a grainy camera phone, is just going to see, oh my God, that police officer was aggressive. Why did he have to swear at that guy? But I gained compliance. I gained an understanding. I gained some form of relationship with that individual. We're both pretty big guys, and in my career, because of the gift of gab that I was taught very well in my shiny shoes and bright uniform phase, I've not been in a lot of fights because of it. And I think that's a lost skill, and I think the public is going to suffer for it.
Yeah, it's something people don't realize. Policing is always something that grabs a public eye. The most read articles in most local newspapers involve, if you look, most newspapers now will actually sort of grade their articles, the top 5 trending articles right now based on readership, electronic readership. And, whatever is the big crime or, police incident, it tends to sort of lead the interest of the public. And people are always interested in what we do. And people are always interested in the outcome of criminal activity and so forth. So there's a great deal of interest in policing, whether it's a negative interest seeking to attack and tear us apart, or a positive interest, or even a fairly benign interest. Generally, if people are given the choice of reading something about, some meeting in council chambers about a new bylaw for allowing flower beds, or a police chase, they're going to watch the story or read the story about the police chase. So we certainly compel the public. The problem is like anything else, if you're not in that profession, it's difficult to really know everything that goes on. And as a result, the combination, you ever you hear the aphorism, a small amount of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Well, when you have that great level of interest that I mentioned a few minutes ago, combined with, say, a lack of accurate insight, which is no one's fault. If you're not a cop, how can you have the insight? Then it stands for an awful lot of misunderstandings, misinterpretations of what we do, which is why some stories concerning the police will linger in the public mind, in the news and so forth for years, certain stories, because of that very equation of a high level of interest, but actually a low level of understanding. And when you have these terrible, terrible political decisions that are done strictly for politics, it's a vote grabbing thing, where you do like the Liberal government did. And I'm not, if it was NDP or Conservative, I would indict them too. It's not a Liberal versus any other party thing. But what they did in Ontario with basically ruling out the ability for officers to engage in street checks to people, you've again removed contact between the police and the people, and you increase that gulf, and then what you get is even less understanding. So again, we have this very high level of interest, but the understanding becomes lower and lower every day, because you get these crafty politicians who have never served a day of their lives in the line of duty, and going out in a police car for a one night shift and thinking that you're an expert is a crock of shit. And what happens is they affect these changes that, like I said earlier, they literally vandalize the relationships between the police and the people. And then again, the very worst part of it is mainstream media will then, heap accolades upon the person who affected those changes because of the fairly left-wing aspect of the mainstream media, let's be honest. And then what people get are snippets. They're at the gym, or they're at their doctor's office, or wherever it is, and there's a large screen TV in the waiting room, and they get a few snippets about some local police issue. And wow, that's it. That's all they learn. So I would love to see Ontario rescind the ridiculous decision of making street checks more complicated than a friggin' bank loan, and just bring back common sense in that fashion, that police are allowed to get out of their cars and go talk to people. Start reestablishing those basic relationships. You can't talk about defunding you see it in the States, right? And that may be a subject in a few minutes, but the defund thing, you see that every city in the States that has advocated defund is now on their knees begging for police to come back. What's the surprise there? That when you left the door open, you would get, all kinds of insects in the house, that if you let a fire burn, the house burns down, that if how complicated was it to figure out that when you took all the police away, that the streets would become more violent? Who comes up with these ideas? Like it's like dictating to doctors that you can't use scalpels anymore. You have to, tear the flesh apart with your hands because someone's offended by a scalpel. I don't know. And none of these things are good for society or for the relationship between the police and the society. And they're always touted as being some great thing. And then the person who made that great thing, they fuck off and they find some job in, what do retired politicians always end up doing? They get some job or another in consulting because of all their contacts, and they retire with massive bank accounts, and their kids get to go to private schools. In the meantime, our society is badly affected by what they've done, and it's a long-term horrible effect. But they're celebrated and feted as social heroes, and they accrue all kinds of benefits. And then everyone turns around and looks at us after they've handcuffed us or removed our abilities to talk to people. And, well, why is it you guys are so mean to everybody? Why is it you guys do such a horrible job? It's like, well, quite honestly, we used to do a really good job. But the concept, if it's not broken, don't fix it, doesn't enter into a politician's mind. They have to constantly be seen by the public to be doing something. Otherwise, how do they justify their existence? So someone's always coming up with these bright ideas. and they're very destructive. They're very destructive. And it's very difficult for us because no one takes us seriously if we argue against those ideas, because we're seen as protecting our interests. And the truth is, we get paid whether or not we get out of the car and talk to people. We get paid whether or not we engage that dodgy looking guy at 3 a.m. on the corner. We get paid either way. The fact that the police are trying so damn hard to do their jobs to serve the public, against the best or the best efforts of some politicians to stop us, is what's amazing. Because when you see officers, jumping out of their cars and engaging people, they're doing it there's a big risk now to do that. If you don't follow every rule that's been given to you in Ontario in engaging somebody, you can end up in all kinds of trouble. It really affects you. So, like Sierra said, we used to get out of the car and engage people, and we would engage them on their level. If we're in a tough, biker bar, you speak their language. If you're speaking to a 70-year-old lady who took a tumble down the stairs and broke her ankle, you speak to her in her language. And if you're at a house and you're dealing with someone at a break and enter, you speak to them like you speak to people of that milieu or background. We can adapt and adopt, and that's a skill that's kind of getting lost, because if it's like anything else, the famous baseballer Ted Williams said, just keep doing it. The better you'll become better at something if you keep doing it. And by comparison, the same thing is true. If you don't do it, you don't get good at it. As a matter of fact, you lose those skills. So if you're teaching young police officers that they can't talk to people, that they can't engage people, that they have their heads buried in a laptop computer in their car instead of engaging the person in front of them, you lose a lot in skill. You lose a lot in being able to mitigate situations. I mean, Sierra and I, we're big guys, but we can probably go to a call, like a disturbance call with 20 people fighting, and we can lumber up there and we can talk them out of it. We can do all kinds of things to avoid fighting, because we have a lot of experience at talking to people. Don't forget, we do this job for 30 years. And most people who criticize us have never been in a fight in their lives, ever. When you actually get into a physical altercation, all kinds of bad things happen. It's not like the movies where there's, manly punches to the jaw and, you take 20 punches before you fall down. In reality, it's ungainly grappling and people rolling all over the ground and inadvertent terrible injuries and so forth and so on. And there's all kinds of opportunity every time you engage someone with physical force of you getting really hurt, no matter what you carry on your belt or how much you weigh. There's all kinds of opportunity for you to get hurt. And when you consider that we do this job for 30 years, we got to be careful. We can't be, jumping out of airplanes every day and physically risking ourselves that way, because we have to go the long haul. The person who's gotten piss drunk and, he just graduated, or he just, I don't know what the celebration might be, and he's, 22 and young and full of, piss and vinegar. It's his one fight of his lifetime. And, he throws a chair at the cops and whatever the case may be. We don't do that. We don't go into situations and either, go there, A, looking to fight, or B, using force as our first option. Guys like me and Sierra, that's our last option. Even though we're big and we can handle ourselves, because we've learned how to talk to a variety of different people over the years, uninhibited by ridiculous political decisions, we've got these abilities to talk to people. And when you lose that skill, you don't only lose the trust of the public, who only will then have contact with police in a bad situation, but you also reduce the skill. Like I said, Ted Williams saying that you do it every day, you get better at it. If you don't let the young cops talk to people, they lose a skill. And then we have this increasing gulf between the police and the people, and then some enterprising politician starts a group and says, how do we repair this damage that the police have wrought on society by not talking to people? Well, actually, that was you guys 15 years ago. Thanks. And it just becomes this ever, what do you want to call it? It's like watching a whirlpool. It just kind of grows wider and wider. They make bad decisions. They enforce them upon the police. the police undertake these decisions. It radically reduces our effectiveness and our ability to communicate with the public, which causes other problems, which are then seized upon by the same politicians to have yet more controls and yet more ridiculous decisions made by people who never worked a day in their lives on the job. I always say to people, in the United States, until they started checklisting in operations, and you can see this in Dr. Atul Gawande's book, The Checklist Manifesto, there were some 150,000 deaths a year, post-operative infections, 150,000 in the United States versus the 400 people that have been shot by police in the States. Have you ever seen demonstrations in cities torn apart because of someone who died of a post-op infection that was preventable? Never. And yet, every time a police officer shoots someone, no matter how well justified he or she may have been, there's almost inevitably some sort of community pushback. And so I say to people, can you imagine if people who were utterly uninformed and had no dealing with medicine decided to start just dictating to doctors how things should be done to reduce this ridiculously high number of post-operative deaths? And no one ever does that because the medical profession wouldn't stand for it. Plus, would you want to have an operation done by someone who has no medical experience? I wouldn't. And yet everyone thinks it's okay to conduct every kind of social engineering process, experiment you can conceive of on the police. That's apparently okay. And then when it all goes wrong and there's problems, they turn around and look at us and they say, well, you must need more training in this, or you must need more training in that. And they're wrong, but it becomes this very vicious cycle. Yeah. Anyways, I went on too long. So
that was all great information. I have a quick question, and this is sort of regarding the future of police in Canada and where the trajectory is headed. Is there a dialogue currently between the leadership in the police and the leadership in politics in Canada in helping to bridge that rift that both of you mentioned between the public and the police, and the negative perceptions and the cameras coming out and all this, I guess, unwarranted drama that's just been surrounding the police especially the last little while? Is there a dialogue that's going on to try to bridge that gap and to try to repair and repeal the negative policies that have come into place?
So any politician, any police service is going to tell you that, yes, we're talking with the various police associations, and we're hand in hand, lockstep with the government, and we're moving forward to do the best thing possible for the police to better interact with the community and the public at large and win back their trust. When they start talking about winning back their trust, that means to me that you lost trust in the agency to begin with. And now you're trying to bring back something that, like Charlie said, we had for years. We were doing it, but you set the rules. So they've created this chasm, this divide that they're trying to build a bridge to bring it back together. But now they're trying to build something, and what they're building is a very forced, yes, we want you to go out and talk to the public. Oh, but we only want you to talk to them like this. Yes, we want you to go to, go out and, meet the people, talk to the people. Oh, but we only want you to do it on Police Week, and you hand out little stickers and shake hands and kiss babies. That becomes a problem, right? You're taking away from that core piece of policing. Right now, the pendulum has swung too far. And at some point, it's going to swing back. The unfortunate part is something is going to happen, and it will be something so great that the politicians will start pointing fingers, and the chiefs of police, because let's face it, they represent their policing agencies, will point fingers back at the politicians, and the public will revolt. They will see it as, oh my God, we're paying money in our taxes to have the police do this job. And they're going to forget that, 25, 30 years ago, right, that's kind of the time frame we're going to look at. The police officer would pull up in his car, put it in park, tell dispatch, yeah, I'm out for a stroll along Main Street. We don't do that anymore unless you're told. And then the public is going to come back and then demand that to happen. But they're going to demand it to happen not in the very scripted sort of community policing sort of standpoint. They're going to demand to see that happen when the police show up, right? When the police are just on regular patrol. That was something we used to do. I was taught 25 years ago. It has to come back. Is there conversations? Yes. Are they the right conversations? I don't think so, because like Charlie said, there's always a political agenda. I want to stay in politics. I want to get the next bigger level of political gain, or I'm the chief of police and I want to use this to launch myself into my political career or my consulting career. Take a look at a lot of the police services and just look at the history of their police chiefs. They've either retired, finished their contracts, and gone into consulting or politics. So, is there a conversation? Yes. Is it the right conversation? No. Are we going to see a change from these conversations? Absolutely not. We're going to see the rift get wider until something drastically happens.
100%, because the difference between people like myself and Sierra who are in the lower levels in terms of, let's say, rank hierarchy
Position, yeah.
And the people who are at the top is that there tends to be a great deal of ambition at the top. And where Sierra and I are, there's a great deal of concern for competency in the job you do, which is not a slam on the upper level management in any way. It's just that the people who want to rise up, the people who want to go forward in their careers and are driven by ambition will have very different motives than people like Sierra and I who struggle just to try and get a positive outcome for the society we serve. Like, I'm not kidding. Mm-hmm. You will fight budgets and you will fight bureaucracy and you will fight all kinds of things just to get one step forward. So when you have agencies run by people, and this seems to be the case in every country I've dealt with, you'll find that the people who run things are ambitious and self-interested. So they'll only take choices that are going to reflect positively on them. Whereas we're interested in doing the right thing to, better control organized crime or shut down the fact that, hundreds of thousands of dollars, go out the country every day to foreign countries through organized crime, weakening the Bank of Canada's stance on this, that, and the other, from this massive loss of, physical assets. All of these things are things that we're interested in at the lower levels. And at the upper levels, they tend to be interested in moving. I'm sorry to say, and this is my opinion, so it's not a, get myself fired or transferred or whatever the case may be. But there tends to be a lot more of a reliance on what was I saying there, on their own personal agendas. I can't get promoted or I can't get this job in consulting if I take these controversial positions. So I have to, it's like you see with the whole woke status with these companies that are, scrambling over one another to be more woke than the next until it starts to hit their bottom line, then they pull back. And the same thing with an awful lot of supervisory levels, I'd say, higher levels. If your motivation is only going to be your own personal career and advancement, what's that going to do? We're not going to, unless, talking to the public and doing the job better becomes something that's going to get you a job in the afterlife when you leave the job, it's not going to happen. So when you ask, do you see something, and Sierra says, no, I see the chasm growing. Yeah, I agree. The chasm is growing. It will always grow because of the nature of the majority of the people who move up the ranks. They're looking to continue to move up the ranks and move up and up and up. And you don't, climb the ladders and avoid the snakes by making the bad decision or the controversial decision. You only get there by doing things that are absolutely advocated by the loudest voices in society, that being the activist groups and the mainstream media. And just ask yourself a simple question. It's very easy to test this theory. Think of something that, like canceling the concept of, like I said earlier, about the street check process in Ontario, where you were able to stop and talk to people. Imagine just canceling that right now. You would have voices who would raise the specter of racism. How, I don't know, that's racist, but sure. You would have people raising the specter of civil liberties, a variety of things, despite the fact that we're currently firing people who don't get vaccines, take vaccines that they don't want to take. So much for civil liberties. But you can't turn these things back. And any police administrator who's looking for a nice job after he or she moves on from policing to some job in the civilian world, they're not going to attach their name or their reputation to anything that's remotely controversial. So Sierra's right. The chasm's only going to grow because there's no political will for the chasm to come together. It's unfortunate.
So is it fair to say that?
Fair to say I won't have a job Monday morning.
I'll be right there with you, brother.
Is it fair to say, given the current state of the leadership in the police and in politics, but specifically the police, there's a real sort of lack of integrity and backbone and adherence to the original mission and purpose of the police in Canada, and even just to consider being in a leadership position or a high up within the police, you have to sort of sell out on certain values or policies that you think are good for effective policing. Is it really only just allowed for people who are going to come up there and, like you said, just advocate for what's popular with the public?
I think so. I would say that 25 years ago when I got on, the police chief was the person that advocated for the organization as a whole. Yes, there was a little bit of politics associated to it. You represented the police service as a whole to the community. You were the face of the police service. Today, I find it's more politics than it is supporting the police agency. It's exactly like Charlie said. Who's screaming the loudest? Is it Black Lives Matter? Is it any of the anarchist groups? Is it a left or right wing? The position of the police chief is now, I will only make a decision that will appease the loudest voice, as opposed to make a decision that will benefit the organization and the community that we have to serve. So what you're seeing is a decision under the guise of it's the community, but it's really the guise of my next bump, my next step, my next political agenda. It's there's always an agenda associated to making those decisions. Long gone are the days of seeing a police chief come in and truly represent the organization. I've seen organizations that the chief has come in and turned things around and got that positive voice, and then all of a sudden they were back at square one because the politics took over. I'm seeing it now in some other police services that my colleagues and I, of course, just like this podcast, we sit down and we talk over beer or coffee and just we're shaking our heads going, oh my God, can you believe this happened in my agency, my organization? And we're all singing from the same songbook. We're all, we're talking police services from across the province, and we're all having the same problem. But of course, we're all of the same vintage. Hey, remember 25 years ago when the chief wandered in on parade and said, "Hey, what's going on? You guys are doing a great job." I don't think most police chiefs now know where the parade room is. Right? It's all politics. It's all smoke and mirrors. So whenever I hear them talking about, I'm going to come in and be a true leader, I'm going to turn this organization around, I'm going to be the best, and so on and so forth. Smoke and mirrors, man. There's been no true leadership in policing in, I would say, easily the last 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
It gets dictated. That's the sad thing. It gets dictated to the police agencies by non-police entities. And like I said earlier, the analogy about having people who have zero medical training suddenly dictating to the medical profession how surgery should be conducted, how this or that should be done. It's ridiculous. It won't happen in medicine. It won't happen in any of the STEM fields because you can't argue with physics, or if you do, you'll lose. I mean, so you won't see people entering or somehow dictating to the fields in engineering or technology, medicine, engineering, and so forth. You won't see people dictating to those entities how to do things because they don't know. They have a degree in interpretive dance theory and they've been trying to find some sort of paying job. And now they've got one as some community activist, and they're going to, think up these ideas to change, medicine or these other highly technical fields. I don't think so. It won't happen. So, but they get to somehow have free hand to meddle in what we do. And don't get me wrong, we're not averse to change. But police, firefighters, first responders, paramedics, we tend to be very, very pragmatic people. We tend to be, what happens is you have a very high volume of calls for service. You have limited time to do them in. And you almost become like a shortstop, just, grabbing hot balls and throwing them out at first and on to the next one when you're working patrol in the front lines. And that's a very space is very compressed in those experiences. You don't have a lot of time to do too much with one and then you're on to the other. So to have people in the community whose experiences have nothing to do with the police suddenly start dictating to police chiefs, this is what we're doing. It's, to me, it's very dangerous. I always say, it's just the same, I always use the analogy, well, would you allow them to do these changes in medicine or engineering, start dictating to engineers, ridiculous positions on, applications of physics or something, suddenly bridges would be falling down everywhere. Why do we allow this in policing? I think it's because they can't. People who are motivated by, sometimes the motivations are honest. Most times they're not. Most times people realize that if they start a website and start a activist group and start banging the drum and kicking the fuss up about certain incidents, eventually the government will throw money at them to go away. And that's what they're really after, is they're after that money. They're after, donation money. That's a big one. Tons of money that way. The people who donate the money never get anything for it. They never see anything as a result of it, but the person who's doing all the drum banging gets all the money. So as long as you have people with absolutely no policing experience being allowed to dictate to the police how we should operate, we're going to continue to have what Sierra referred to as a chasm between the people and the police. You're going to continue to have institutional problems resurrected over and over again. And, we have officers doing jobs that have nothing to do with policing now, nothing to do with policing. And we're so short on the front line, it's just ridiculous, it's criminal. And yet we have people who are, tasked to do jobs that you shake your head at and say, how is this even a policing function? Especially when we're as short as we are. So yeah, I think until like I can't see a police chief being able to stand up and have and exude any sort of common sense, because he or she will be cut down by the powers that be very quickly. They won't be allowed to go on being, you know, leaders. If you represent the troops and if you represent common sense, I guarantee you'll be shut down. If you parrot all of the current popular social engineering phrases, whether you believe them or not, and most of them don't believe them, they just happily parrot them, then you will move forward and move up and everything. And like I said earlier, if your motivation is entirely ambition, then all you're going to do is be motivated by whatever gets you to move forward. And if moving forward means accommodating some of the most ridiculous suggestions you can imagine that, you know, damage and destroy relations between police and the people in the name of restoring them, then that's what's going to happen. I don't see it changing anytime soon, and thank God I retire very soon.
All right. Well,
Cheerful,
thank
huh?
you. Thank you both very much for coming on and speaking. We got to wrap this up, but it was great. Really great to hear from you both. Sorry, Charlie.
So I said, you're such a cheerful conversation from both of us.
I'm really looking forward to the future now. Yeah, but no, really, really great to hear from you both. It's I think we can all agree that hearing this sort of perspective from active duty members in the force is definitely not very heard, or just shut out, or not. People aren't really willing to give it a listen. So hopefully.
Oh no, you're gonna get Leslie shepherded, if that's a verb. You know, if you will, the young guy, you're gonna be sort of like lumped in there with Lindsay Shepherd, the one from Ryerson who got jumped on by the three.
Oh, that's you're right. I heard about that.
You're gonna be lumped in with that.
I'm already headed in that direction. That ship has sailed.
You'll have tons of people that comment, you know, about what a bunch of bullshit this is, and you're shilling for fascists and all this nonsense. You can't talk to some people, no matter what you say to them. They think you're but you're right. You're on the right path. I mean, you have a lot of common sense and you have a lot of good experiences, life experiences, and you're interpreting current events through the lens of your life experiences, which are very grounded in reality. So that's a good thing. And most young people, myself included, take a lot longer to get there. Well, good for you. I mean, but when you fight the good fight and you do the right thing, you're going to be much easier to be Antifa. It's much easier to be whatever is breaking and smashing and destroying things in the name of, I don't know what the fuck they're doing that in the name of. It's much easier to do that because no one takes you to task for it. As soon as you stand up for something, and that's what C.S. Lewis's book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I mean, look at that very quickly in the book. Aslan, the lion, who sort of represents, you know, courage and standing up for the weak, has to die, and basically a Jesus Christ depiction, but he's attacked by all these hideous creatures of the forest, these nasty, naughty, evil little goblin things that would never take a clean shot at him. But once he was tied down on the forest floor and totally helpless, that's when they came out and cut his mane off and degraded him and laughed at him and everything else. And even though C.S. Lewis wrote that book, I believe over 100 years ago, that's as accurate absolutely right now today as it was then. That people who stand up for decency, well, decency is a very subjective thing, stand up against bullying, stand up against might harming the weakest parts of society, those people will always be basically questioned and attacked by the less valiant aspects of our society. And like Aslan in C.S. Lewis's Lion and Witch, we will always be attacked, and we will always be set upon by these nasty, awful little goblin creatures that come out when your hands are tied. not when it's a fair fight. Those will be the people leaving all the nasty comments on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm looking
Come up to
forward.
my face and let's have a fair conversation, as opposed to just posting ACAB and, you know, raise fists and everything else. Those are very easy things to do, but they actually have zero effect. One thing I wanted to ask Sierra, I don't know if I should, but I will. Sierra, do you mind? I hate to do this, but do you mind, because no one can see you? Do you mind mentioning that what your race is?
Oh, I'm a black man.
Yeah. And so you're working for the forces of oppression, and I guess you're a big sellout to your people and everything.
Yeah, well, it's something to go to a call. In fact, to tell you briefly before we wrap up, remember going to a call where it was, the subject of the incident was another black guy. And as soon as I stepped out of the car, there was the immediate him thinking, "Hey, we're kindred spirits. We have the same skin color. Therefore, I've got an out." And all of a sudden, it was, "Hey, brother, what's going on? Yeah, listen, the old lady, she did this, brother," and that's not my position to take that stance. Hey, you're black, I'm black, therefore, I'm going to give you an out. So I did my job, and immediately when this guy realized, oh, this black officer is going to do his job, we're not buddies anymore. I was no longer his brother. I suddenly became Uncle Tom. So the whole time that I interacted with them, fuck you, Uncle Tom, I'm not telling you anything. Fuck off, Uncle Tom, as I'm driving him down to the cell block. And the whole time, yes, sir, no, sir, no, sir, I need your name, sir. And I was very polite the entire time, which I think probably pissed him off. But my color clearly is what this guy thought was going to get him an out, and it didn't. I get that all the time.
Which is, it's really interesting, because it's funny how you get an awful lot of activists who are white, and they'll claim to speak for people who are non-white. And I speak to so many non-white people who clearly, straight out say they're not speaking for me. Don't know where they're coming from, but speak for yourself. I'll speak for myself, kind of thing. And I always like Sierra's perspective, because nowadays, unfortunately, race gets thrown into absolutely everything we do. It shouldn't, and it doesn't enter our calculations the way that people think it does, not even remotely. But you can't tell people that, because if they don't believe you, it doesn't matter what you say. They'll just, guy's full of shit, he's lying, they're all, whatever. But that's why I love having Sierra's commentary or point of view. It's very difficult for a 22-year-old white university student who feels he or she knows the plight of the black people better than black people. And I'm sure Sierra's had the experience of white people lecturing to him about his own traditions or his own culture.
Oh, yes.
And it just becomes this thing where, how did race and policing get so badly conflated? I understand the past. I understand issues that are more American than Canadian, but borders, or the internet is borderless, and it doesn't matter. And after a while, it just becomes this big black cloud of roving hate that doesn't respect borders. And suddenly there's all these pat descriptions and sort of caricatures of police officers. Yeah, caricatures. If you're white, you're this caricature. If you're black, you're this caricature. And Sierra's perspective as a black man working both as a police officer and his reaction with people inside the organization is always really edifying, very illuminating to me. And I wanted to bring that up because his picture isn't evident, and I didn't want to bring the race thing in, but I kind of wanted to just sort of, hey man, how do you perceive it? And it's like, well, a lot of times the people who are doing all the yelling and screaming claim to yell and scream on my behalf, and I don't agree with them. Like, we're all different. Why does it have to be, if you're black, you all think this way, and if you're white, you must think that way? That's such bullshit. I know that people don't believe this. We're probably the least racist people out there, because we constantly have contact with every member of society, and you have to be able to talk to everybody respectfully. You can't just go in there and be a dick. So we have a lot more experience with people than as a lot of the activists give us credit for. But it's not in their interest to foster. It's like the Israeli, the conflict in the Middle East between the Arabs and the Israelis. It's not in certain groups' interest to advocate peace. It's in their interest to constantly pick the scab, constantly rip everything up, constantly exacerbate tensions, just to keep themselves in money, keep themselves in donations. So it's very unfortunate, but people like Sierra, who are highly intelligent and highly experienced and are able to speak to that honestly and from a position of experience, and they can lay to rest an awful lot of that bullshit. And that's why I asked if you minded mentioning it. Anyways, one of the best cops I know. It's a real pleasure to have been working with him. I'm seriously, man. I'm not just saying that.
No, pleasure's always mine, brother.
Well, on that note, gentlemen, I just want to thank you both again for giving your time and your wisdom and thoughts and experience from your careers and outlooks on the future. It's been very great to hear, and thank you very much. Really appreciate it from both of you.
Thank you, man. Good luck.
No, thank you. Best of luck to you, man.
Thanks.
Here we go, y'all.
All righty. Cheers.
Cheers.